Awesome. All right. Redo. So we're going to introduce our guest of honor and our speaker this evening, Mr. Rob Leathen. He's an artist, an author, mental health educator, and advocate, peer supporter, and a 29-year veteran of the fire service, holding the current rank of Acting Platoon Chief. He shares his lived experience with PTSD, depression, and suicidal ideation to help chip away at the stigma that still exists surrounding first responder mental health. His mantra is silence does nothing but strengthen stigma. So not only does he talk the talk, but he also walks the walk. We have the distinct pleasure of hearing him speak to us tonight and share a story. Rob, welcome. And we're going to turn it over to you so you can share with the group. Thank you again for being here.
Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to everybody. Hopefully I don't bore you too much. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm almost 30 years in the fire service as a career firefighter. Like many firefighters, I started out as a volunteer. The department I got hired in usually started everybody in dispatch. We were a small department then. So I did 2.5 years in fire dispatch, dispatching 9 different fire departments around. Got out onto the floor, worked my way up the ranks, from firefighter to acting captain to acting platoon chief. In 2018 was when I guess my life really started going for crap. And it's funny, I tell people that it wasn't a bad call that made my cup overflow. It was a simple memo from a deputy chief. And I just, sent some nice, respectful emails back to him, disagreeing with his memo. And I just couldn't let go of it. In addition to that, there's all the other standard life impacts of PTSD. So, my wife our marriage was failing a lot. This all the standard stuff, like emotional outbursts, crying for no reason at all, anger all the time. And it was February of 2019 when I sat down with my wife and I said, I think I need help. So I talked to somebody I felt comfortable with on my department, and he put me in contact with a place near where my department is called the Trauma Center, and they specialize in treating first responders with PTSD. Got set up with a therapist who I'm still with now after 2 3/4 years. I tell people that next to my wife and my daughter, she's the 3rd most important woman in my life because she's literally helped save my life. So yeah, I started therapy for whatever I had in February of 2019, still at work. April 8th was my last day at work. And it was any other day. We ran 5 or 6 different medical calls. And every time that the tones would go off, I would come back from the call and I'd realize that, yeah, you know what, my fight or flight is still up there. And then, the next call would come in and it got higher and higher. And by the end of the day, it was like, I'm sitting, in the lounge area and my hands are going like this. And so it's like, yeah. So I went to my doctor, my family doctor, and said, I'm in therapy for what's probably PTSD. I need a note to be off work for a couple of weeks. And that's because that's what I thought it would take. And again, she gave me a note saying, here you go, you're off work until further notice. Like that was for first responders. I mean, our identities are defined by the uniforms we wear. And when you're being told that, well, guess what? You're not going to be wearing that uniform indefinitely. It was hard to accept. So still kept going through therapy. June 2nd, 2019 was I'll say my lowest day. Again, I had a massive fight with my wife that, of course, I started, went for a nice 5-hour drive and which is another example of, like isolation, one of the key, one of the big symptoms of PTSD. So I isolated, and that's where I made my decision about suicide. It was at that point in my journey, I was feeling hopeless, helpless, had no idea what my triggers were, had no idea what was going on. I hadn't received my diagnosis yet. And yeah, that Sunday, June 2nd, 2019, I made my choice that the solution was to take my own life. Came home. Fortunately, we didn't have anything in the medicine cabinet that would have accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. By that time, it was later in the day. I ended up going to bed. Next day, wake up, think, okay, well, I'm going to figure out what plan B is going to be. But it was during that couple of days that I started thinking about a friend and platoon mate who died by suicide in early 2018. And I thought about it a lot, and I thought, it's a great funeral, typical, firefighter funeral. We had lots of people there in uniform, fire trucks, aerials up with flags and all that. And it was really good. But during the funeral, I realized we all knew why we were there, but nobody would really speak it. And what I realized is that was stigma around suicide, right? So, I mean, we're slowly chipping away at the stigma around mental health and PTSD and first responders and veterans, but the stigma around suicide is still 10 times worse. And I thought about his wife and his 7-year-old son, and I thought, you know what, they're going to have to live with that stigma for the rest of their lives. And that's what made me realize that, no, I don't want my family, my wife, my son, and my daughter to have to experience that either. And that's what saved my life. So in his death, he actually saved my life. So it was at that point where I decided, yeah, this is, I don't want anybody to feel like that. So after the June 2nd, I did get my diagnosis, and it was severe PTSD, severe major depressive disorder, borderline OCD. And that was like, okay, you know what? Tell me something I don't know. But I wasn't aware about the depression. I mean, like lots of people, it's like, okay, well, I'm not, curled up in the corner, bawling my eyes out. I can get out of bed. I've got a good sense of humor. How can I be depressed? That was my lack of understanding about depression. So I've been in therapy ever since, and I decided, you know what? I want to make sure that there's no other first responder or veteran that finds himself in the same position I found myself in. So that's why I chose to be very, very open and very public about my battles, sort of. It was October of 2019 when I finally came clean with my wife and my therapist about June 2nd. 4 months later, and the reason why it was 4 months later was because of the stigma surrounding suicide. Right. So I decided at that point, no, my life mission right now, my PTSD is severe enough that I won't be going back on the trucks, and I'm close enough to retirement that I'll retire. But my new purpose in life is trying to educate and advocate for first responder and veteran mental health, right? And to try to do whatever we can do to decrease the suicides of first responders and the veterans. So one of the things that I've done that has helped me is I've got involved in peer support. We have an organization here in Ontario called Boots on the Ground. It's a 1-800 number, 24/7, 365 for first responders to call. That's anonymous. So if they don't feel comfortable, reaching out to somebody in their own department, they can reach out to Boots on the Ground, and it's totally anonymous. So I'm a volunteer call taker, and I found that that's helped me in my recovery. It's helped me with a purpose in life that, you know what, I'm helping other first responders now. You know what, I may not be riding the fire trucks anymore, but I'm still helping people, a smaller subset. I'm no longer helping Joe Public. I'm helping first responders. So I do that as peer support. I give presentations like this. I've done a lot of writing that has been published just on my journey and things that I've experienced throughout my journey. And one of the bigger things I've done is artwork. What I originally started doing, as my therapist suggested for the rumination, was to, pick up an adult coloring book. And I started doing that. And I can remember, getting up at 3 a.m. coloring because I couldn't shut my brain off. The problem I had with that was, you know what, when you color outside the lines and you have like borderline OCD, it drives you nuts. So, coloring didn't really work for me. I tried things like journaling. Journaling really didn't work for me either, because after 30 years, I'm used to writing fire reports in third person. Every time I would journal, it was more about what I did today, as opposed to what journaling was meant to be. Right. So journaling didn't work. So what I tried to do was I tried to be open-minded enough to try everything, keep what worked and get rid of what didn't. So yeah, I didn't stop coloring. I didn't really journal. My writing was helpful. But then I got into artwork. I was always, I guess, graphically inclined, and I was never good with painting or drawing, but I know my way around computers really well. So that's why I thought, okay, digital artwork. And part of my journey, I realized how much more education that there needs to be for first responders and veterans. And you know what? I thought this is a way I can educate people. And I had in my journey, early on in my journey, I had 2 experiences that sort of helped motivate me to peer support and towards education. When I was in therapy, but still at work, I decided to tell my crew. And one of the people on my crew was on our department's peer support team. And when I told him that, yeah, you know what, I'm in therapy for what's probably PTSD, his exact words to me were, oh yeah, we noticed a difference in you almost 2 years ago, but we just chalked it up to you being the grumpy old guy at the end of your career. It's like, okay, that said to me right there, there's a lot more education that needs to be done. My department's peer support team, the guy who heads it, who happened to be on my platoon, he called me a couple of weeks after I went off work, and which was nice, checked in on him. He contacted me again in August, but wasn't to check up on me. It was to ask me to check up on somebody else who had been off. It's like, okay. And then he phoned me again in October, and I had a pretty good idea why he phoned, but I started the conversation with, hey, Dave, how you doing? Like, thanks for calling. Like, what are you calling for? Like, why now? And his exact words were, sorry to have bothered you. I won't call you again. Click, and he hung up on me. So that made me realize that, you know what? There's good peer support and not so good peer support. And that's why I got involved with Boots on the Ground, because they do peer support quite well. I've done 2 different peer support training courses. I've done the assist training for, applied suicide intervention skills training. I've done that. So all that sort of worked towards who I am now. And realizing that there's a lot of education that still needs to be done, I thought, what better way to educate people than by using my artwork? So as I mentioned to Sarah earlier at the beginning, I do my artwork for three reasons, and only three reasons. One, it's very mindful, so it's good for me therapeutically. It's a very mindful process, being creative and focusing on what you're doing. And when you have rumination in your brain, that squirrels run around in your brain, it's nice to be able to calm that, and I can do that through artwork. The other reason why I do my artwork is, of the 69 different pieces I've done so far, there's a handful, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 that I use to educate people, but those ones specifically deal with problematic calls of mine. So my artwork helps me that way as well, to work through some of the problematic calls. So there's that. And then the third reason is, again, gets back to that education part, where I can use my artwork to educate people about PTSD, especially first responders who, like my crewmate, who had no clue about PTSD and what to look for. And that's what I use the artwork for. And like I said, I've done 69 different pieces right now. I don't do my artwork, as I use inspiration that drives my artwork. So it's not like I think, okay, I want to deal with this issue and come up with an art piece. It's more like I'm talking with people and they'll say something, and it's like, ooh, I could come up with a good art piece to convey that. So yeah, that's why I do it. I'm not going to lie, my artwork deals with a lot of dark topics. But as I've told people, you know what? First responder dealing with PTSD and depression, and suicidal ideation, it's not always rosy with rose-colored glasses. It is dark. So yeah, some of my artwork deals specifically with, like suicide, and I'll get it when we get a chance. I'll show you some of the ones that specifically deal with suicide, and it's about things that I see that impact, certain aspects of PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and suicidal ideation that motivates me. So if you want, I can show you some of the artwork and explain some of them to you if you guys don't mind, or if you want to ask questions. I'll leave that. Okay, Terry says yes, please. Okay, so I'll show you some of my artwork. Just bear with me while I share my screen. That one. Okay, share. Okay, can you guys see this? Yeah?
We sure can.
Okay, so one of the first things, art pieces I did was this one here. And I did this because I was having a conversation with a peer support person from another department. And he made the comment that, we were talking about first responder suicide. And he made a comment that, you know what, we can't save everybody. And that really, really irked me. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about what we always hear, we're here for you. You're not alone. Just reach out. Well, what bothered me was that, a lot of times first responders and veterans, they don't reach out. So saying, we're here for you. You're not alone. Just reach out. It's meaningless. Maybe we should reach in. We're first responders. Maybe we should go in and make the rescue. And that's what sort of motivated me to do this particular art piece. Another one, this one here is one of my favorites. Like I said, it's called Face to Face. And I did this sort of as representative of my own dance with death. And basically it's simple. It's like, if you're a first responder and this is your dance partner, you want to make sure you're the one that's leading, because otherwise, right? So that's what sort of motivated that one. Now, the other one that I did that revolves around suicide is this one: part of the problem or part of the solution. One of the things that really bothered me is that, the stigma around suicide, people don't talk about it. It's like, we don't talk about those things. And it amazed me that, I've come across first responders who don't even use the word suicide. They'll say, I was in a dark place, or the dark time, or, use the word suicide. It takes away its power. Talk about it. When we talk about it, it normalizes it. Like I always say, we should be talking about suicide no differently than we talk about, what we're going to have for dinner, or, your favorite sports team. So it's about normalizing the conversation around suicide. So that's what this one was. There's the first responder getting ready to crawl into the pill bottle with different methods of taking their own life around it. All the pills spell help me, but you've got, people that represent society going, shh, we don't talk about that. So that's what sort of drove me to do that particular piece. One of the other ones, and those in dispatch will understand this. And this is truthfully one of my problematic calls, but one of the things that really bothers me is you hear a lot of first responders saying to people in dispatch, well, how can that bother you? You weren't even there. But the reality is, being in dispatch, there are some things that you could never unhear, ever. And in my case, without getting into too many details, I took a 911 call for a fatal apartment fire, and the call came from inside the apartment. So, that's one of my problematic calls. There were things you can never, ever unhear. So I did this piece to try to educate those first responders who have that position that, well, how can that bother you? You weren't even there. Well, you don't have to be there to have a call, be a problematic for you, because we hear things too, right? So again, that's why I did one like that to educate. One of the other ones that I particularly like is this one here. Don't be the frog in the pot. So one of the things that I try to tell people about PTSD is, there's sort of two kinds. There's PTSD and there's like complex PTSD, and, complex PTSD is an accumulation of trauma, which is generally what a lot of first responders will get. And I tell people that, there's that story of, you put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump out. But if you put the frog in a pot of cold water on the stove and you turn the stove on, it'll eventually boil to death. And the reason why is because that change is so slow that the frog doesn't even notice. And that's very similar to the way complex PTSD plays out in people. That's the way it played out in me. I tell people, it's not like you don't have it today and you wake up tomorrow with it. It builds over time so slow and so subtly that you aren't even aware of it until it starts really screwing up your life. So that's why I did that, to try to educate people that, you got to be aware of it creeping into your life. So there's a couple of other ones I've done, like I do equine therapy as well. So I did one that's basically, who was it who's doing the equine therapy down in Texas? All right, the
Michael.
Yeah. So Michael knows that horses are incredibly in tune with what you're giving off that you don't even know about. So, and that's why I did this particular piece where, you see the reflection of the horse in the SCBA mask of the firefighter. But if you look really close in the eye of the horse, he's seeing the truth that this firefighter's really, really struggling. Right. So I did that one too. I did a couple of other ones, like Like this one here. This one I actually did for my therapist. She had a client who made this exact comment, like, why this call? After so many years, why is it this call? And so she said, it's like walking through, she said, first responders are notorious for going through a career of, traumatic incidents and things like that and going, well, which one was it? The reality is, it's all of them. It's like walking through a rainstorm and asking which raindrop got you wet. Right. So that's why I did that particular art piece. A couple of the other ones, like this one is, I think, my favorite. So the reason why I did this one was one of my platoon mates ended up cracking his head on the door frame of the truck getting into it to go to a call. And he had a major concussion. He was off work for 2.5 years trying to recover from post-concussion syndrome. And he always said, you know what? I wish I had a bandage that I could put around my head so that people would take it seriously. So that got me thinking, it's like, yeah, that's pretty much the same with PTSD. I would love to be able to say, see the band-aids on my brain? See? So that's what, I did that one for, to educate people that, you know what? Yeah, it's an invisible injury. You can't see it on the outside, but it's still there. It's real. So that's why I did that one, just to try to convey to people that, you know what? It is like PTSD is an injury. You cannot, as somebody on the outside looking at it, can't necessarily see it. It's not like, I've got a broken arm and you can see the cast. Right. So that's why I that's what motivated me to do that one. A couple of other ones that are near and dear to my heart. I mentioned it, my friend and platoon mate who died by suicide. I did this as a memorial for him, for his wife. So yeah, that's Mike. He's a guy who, in his death, saved me. So so I did that one for his wife. I did another one for somebody. They asked me to try to come up with something to explain what it's like in his head with battling PTSD. And this gentleman is I believe he's a veteran down in Ohio, I think it was. So we talked and I came up with this. He said it's sort of like a filing cabinet with papers coming out of it. And it's just sort of like a bomb goes off. He said, that's what it's like in my head. So this is what I came up with to try to illustrate what he described to me. All right. A couple of the other ones that are really near and dear to my heart are this one here. So I tried to put into words, what hypervigilance is like, or what dissociation is like, or, what, not being able to feel emotions. So I thought this particular image was the best way I could describe it. Right. So I picked 6 of my more problematic symptoms and I did some artwork. So it's like rumination. I thought, okay, well, there's that. I was going to put a hamster there running on the wheel. It's like just going round and round and round. But, I found that picture. Or, hypervigilance, like here. It's like I've got cameras everywhere looking for everything. And, I've got the big ear. I'm always listening for stuff, right? Always. So I use this, and same with emotions, right? I figured, like the Wheel of Fortune type wheel. Well, if you look really close, there's tons of emotions on it. And when you're emotionally dysregulated, it really is like spin the wheel and figure, and whatever it lands on is the emotion you're going to feel. So I did that to try to explain to people in a graphic way, what some of the symptoms are like. This one here, this is one of my favorites. This one is a relatively new one. Actually, I finished that one about 3-4 weeks ago. So the problem that we have up here in Canada in emergency service organizations that is likely the same in the US is like toxic leadership. And that toxic leadership impacts a member's ability to recover. So what I tried to describe with this one is that you see the firefighter on the right side of the scales, and it's labeled trauma exposure, and OSI for operational stress injuries, and PTSD down here. There's the Grim Reaper indicating that's a factor in what's going on. But on this side, the other factors, and you see things like organizational culture, invalidation, bullying, claim appeal, sanctuary trauma, institutional betrayal. All those things have a major impact on a first responder's ability to recover. So that's why I really wanted to figure out how to graphically display that. So that's what I did with this. And yeah, part of my journey was sanctuary trauma. My department, it's a medium-sized department, but it's not big enough that, we know everybody knows everybody by name. I know the fire chief. I was an acting platoon chief. I was a high-ranking person in my department. I know him. He knows me. We've had heated debates over the years. I've been off just under 3 years. I still haven't heard from him. Not one bit. And it's like, examples of sanctuary trauma. 3 months after I was off work, I got a phone call from a deputy saying, yeah, can you come clean out your locker so that we need to give it to somebody else? It's like, really? The crew lists come out every year, so you know which crew you're on and which station, all that. And it's funny because the one that came out in 2020, my name wasn't on it. Gone. Not even down the bottom with a star beside it or anything. It's just gone. Right. So that's the kind of stuff, that they, certain types of leadership do, right? And they don't care if it impacts a person's recovery. So that's why I really, really wanted to figure out how to convey that concept. So that's why I did that one. One of the other ones is this one here. This is like institutional betrayal. So, there's the first responder precariously balancing on the tightrope, but you've got the hands at each end, one cutting the rope and one burning through it. It's like, you're barely staying on top of it, trying to recover, and you've got your institutions doing things to betray that. Right? One of the other ones that I did, do I have it here? No, I don't have it here. We did one up in Ontario. Our workplace, our workman's comp is called WSIB, Workplace Safety and Insurance Board. And there was the Ontario Association of Police Chiefs at their last convention put forth a resolution that they wanted to lobby the government to decrease the benefits that WSIB would pay to police officers who are off work with PTSD as an incentive to get them to come back to work quicker. It's like, there's another example of toxic leadership, and that's coming from an association of police chiefs. It's like, they don't get it. Every first responder that's off work with PTSD, they want to go back to work. That's what we do, right? That's who we are. And it's not like, I want to milk the system and stay. I want to go back to work. But that's what toxic leadership doesn't really help in recovery. And like I said, one of the, let's see, which one of the other ones I've done. Yeah, this one here. If you look really, really close, there's two firefighters crawling through here. It depends on your black setting on your monitor. There's a Grim Reaper over here. There's a couple demons down below. And that diorama is being held by a senior officer. And if you're in the fire service, you know that 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 bars. So you know this is a fire chief. In the background, there's the previous art piece I just showed you, right? But this was all about, this is a problematic call for me, that there's toxic leadership in my particular department. My fire chief is very old, has very archaic ways of thinking, is driven by his ego, self-promotes himself, and he wants things done his way no matter what. And sometimes his way is an archaic way, and that sort of filters down to fires, for example, where some of the things that get done because that's the way the chief wants it are very old ways of doing it that potentially will cost you your life. And I had one call that this represents that one call. But again, I know it represents my call, and it's helped me process that call. But to anybody other than me, they, the way I describe it, they see it as, okay, there's toxic leadership and it impacts. So this is one of the pieces that, helps me, but educates others as well. So yeah, that's really about it. I mean, we talk about stigma a lot. So I did this one that, there's also self-stigma, right? It's almost as bad as regular stigma. And how often do we stigmatize ourselves? I'm weak. Oh, it's not that bad, or things like, I should be better now. All right. Or, it's my fault this all happened, or, I'm broken. This is how we self-stigmatize ourselves. It's almost like Jekyll and Hyde. So that's why I did this one, the things that we need to stop saying to ourselves. Right. So that's, this is another one I did. First of all, I like Pink Floyd. So Comfortably Numb is one of their amazing songs. But I did this to sort of describe what it feels like being emotionally numb. It's sort of like for me, it's sort of like, I'm in this glass bubble and all this nice stuff, nothing gets in, like happiness and gratitude and joy and sadness. It's all on the outside of that glass bubble. So I use that to try to explain, what it means to be comfortably numb in my case. So that's some of my favorite pieces of artwork. Let me stop sharing. There we go. So yeah, that's basically how I use my artwork to help educate, to help me from a therapeutic point of view. One of the other ones I did that you can sort of see behind me, the old 3 monkeys, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. But you know what? That's what some people are like, stigma. No, I don't see it. I don't hear it. I don't speak it. So it doesn't exist. So, that's one of the ones I use as my wallpaper. But that's how I use my artwork to help me with, with my own journey. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than willing to answer anything. And there is no question that's off limits, other than maybe some of the details of my problematic calls. But other than that, so I see Janet has her hand up.
I do, as a fellow Canadian.
Yeah.
And we spent 5 years in Toronto, in Mississauga, but worked downtown Jarvis and Dundas.
Yep.
And so definitely I want to connect with you. Do you have a website? Because
Yes.
Your pictures are powerful. Can you share that with us?
Sure, absolutely. It's my last name, Leathen.ca.
Okay.
And on there, you'll see all of my artwork, my articles I've written, some of my notable quotes that I've said throughout my journey. You'll see some of the books that I've read, and I've read a lot of books. So,
Well, you'll find other people, if we'd love to have you stay in this group, other people that have books out, and they're pretty powerful. One of the things, do you know of Daniel Sundell?
yep, we're friends
Yeah.
on social media. He
Yeah.
was my original inspiration
Good.
years ago when I saw his artwork.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, every time I start a new art piece, I go through all of his to make sure I'm not duplicating something.
I interviewed him about 3 years ago
Yeah.
on Facebook Live. I live in Edmonton, so he's in just south of me in Leduc. Anyways, I'll let somebody else, but please connect. I just sent you a request on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Let's see who's next. Paul.
Hey, Rob, thanks for sharing your story. Now, some of my most memorable times in my travels here domestically or assisting people like yourself. I really appreciate your artwork. It's very powerful. I think the bond that you're expressing, the loyalty and your courage to share your story, I just want to encourage you. Both my wife and I, because of the work that we do, we tell people all the time, we work with some really skilled people once a week because she works in a courtroom setting where they hear the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And then because of things we do in the parallel lane with our leadership, high octane, first responders, veterans, special operations, it's very common. And I'm really proud of you doing what you're doing. And I'm not surprised that you've gotten some of the responses. I think when I had the privilege of sharing here too, I said, what scares me is those who act like there's not a problem. And they're the ones that have the worst set of circumstances, typically, statistically, after they retire. So I'm just really proud of you, brother.
Well, thank you. You know what? Very early on in my journey, I was like a lot of first responders because of stigma. I was trying to keep it on the down low and quiet. But I realized that, holy shit, that takes a lot of energy to keep things quiet. And that's valuable energy that I could have been using towards my recovery. So I thought, screw it. I mean, I'm going to go public, be open about it. Not to mention the fact that, if I hold a senior rank in my department, I should show some type of leadership, right? And I went public. I said not to, not for any sympathy, not for any pity or anything like that. Well, because I went public because I thought, if me going public helps one person, reflect on their own mental health, or if it, makes just one person ask me a question about PTSD or depression, or if it makes one person who's already suffering not feel alone, then it's worthwhile being public about it. Right. So yeah, that's why I'm public about it. Sorry, Todd. Sorry, I'm looking at different spots. Todd.
Hey, I just wanted to say it's every time I hear someone like yourself tell your story, it reinforces, for years. I kept this to myself. My suffering really started bad in way back in '86. And for a long time, when I got into my IT career, I didn't even tell anyone that I'd been a firefighter because that would start questions about what it was like, and those were topics I didn't want to discuss. I've shared a poem with you that I wrote. Your art. And like you said, Daniel's, it's really inspiring, and it makes me want to share more of mine. I haven't done a lot of that. I just wanted to say how proud I am to call you brother.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I know what you mean about not wanting to share details of some of those problematic calls. That was my biggest struggle. Was my dad would come and visit at night. You know, like I do, that
Yeah.
as many people as we've saved over our career, we don't remember those things. We
No.
remember the ones we lost.
Yep.
And I just, you're coming on here motivates me even more. Here in Iowa, I don't see a lot of organized peer support and wellness training for officers and firefighters. And, you know, when we roll on a house fire or a building fire, that's a failure of fire prevention.
Yep.
And we're fighting fires right now in peer support.
Yeah.
And if we can change the attitude within those agencies, and we can start building resilient firefighters and officers, and making self-care and wellness a part of training from the very beginning, and make critical incident stress management a part of the post-incident playbook. Until we do those things, this conflagration is not going to abate.
So,
And I really feel inspired by you to really continue my training and really try and build a network here in Iowa.
yeah, you'll, based on what you said, you'll probably like my next two art pieces that I'm working on. They're coming out about mental maydays. We as departments, we spend a lot of time in teaching firefighters about maydays, when to call them, where to call them, how to self-rescue. And we have, written policies on, maydays. And yet when it comes to mental issues, silence. How about teaching us about mental maydays? How about teaching us about when, where, who, and how we should be calling a mental mayday, right? We don't, right? So it's a two parts that I'm working on, and you'll probably see it in a week or so, maybe late next week. And yeah, there's two parts. There's one piece shows that, here's what we do for physical stuff, and here's that empty classroom, with the topic of the day, mental mayday, and nothing. All right. And then the second piece is more what happens when that does happen. So again, it's got, two sides to it. It's got, a fire, and you see, a couple firefighters pulling a firefighter out. And on the other side, well, I'll give you a hint. You see, so on the one side, you've got, a firefighter being pulled out because he called a mayday. Then above that, you see the firefighter, just to represent struggle, that, surround, like in a circle of fire, right? Just to convey that he was struggling, and they pull him out. And then on the other side, you've got a type of demon that's trying to, grab the same struggling firefighter, but instead of, a firefighter being pulled out of a burning house, it's going to be, I'll give you guys a sneak hint at it. It's going to be a firefighter, a first responder, right, sitting on top of a casket, because that's all right. We train about maydays, something bad happens, we pull a person out, but we don't train about mental health maydays, like mental maydays. And when we don't do that, well, the end result is, all right. So yeah, that's coming out, probably the end of next week. There's still a few other things I got to do to touch it up, but yeah. The one thing I did want to say is the reason why a lot of my artwork has firefighters in it is because it's incredibly difficult to find police officers who are willing to have their pictures taken. It's incredibly difficult to get paramedics who want to have their picture taken. So I can get access to firefighter pictures all the time. So that's why a lot of my artwork, it's meant as for all first responders. These are common themes for all first responders, but like you said, it's hard to get pictures of police officers. I know Daniel Sundell, he's got a lot of connections, so he can get the pictures he needs. So yeah, that's I've had some people ask me that, like, why is it all just firefighters? Well, it's just because it's access to pictures. Christopher has a question.
First, let me say, wow, so powerful. Your art is kind of breathtaking. And I want to thank you, first of all, by doing what I call living by example. Your story is somewhat reminiscent of me, of a special operator, Medal of Honor recipient, Sergeant Major down in Florida, who puts on his calendar and goes to see a psychologist in uniform and lets everybody know.
Yep.
And that's taking that step forward to making it normal.
Yeah.
You're being here today is normalizing everybody's trauma and being able to talk about it. And that's one of the great things about this group.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing. I'm not going to go a long time. There's a lot of people who want to speak, but in the vein of how we do things in LinkedIn, how can we help support you? What can we do to help get your message out there and make your message much stronger? It's going to help more people.
Okay. You can talk to Todd and get him to open up publicly about his battles. That's the start, right? You know what? It's how can you
Send them
help
some
me?
pictures and you in
Oh,
uniform and your dog and all your buddies. Come on, you guys, send some pictures in uniform.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's that. But you know what? It's the best way you can help me, in addition to sending me pictures that I can use, is take up the cause and make conversations about first responder and veterans, mental health and suicide. Make it normal to talk about it. Like you said, when I see, and I talk with a lot of first responders from all emergency services, and like you said, I know ones that have, tried to take their life and not, and it's like they won't even use the word suicide. It bothers me. It really bothers me. It's if we want to normalize a conversation about it so that we can actually save lives, you got to use the word. You can't tiptoe around it. You got to make it normal. So yeah, how can you help me, Chris? Take up the cause and make the conversations normal.
Absolutely. And I think that give all the credit here to Sarah, who started this group. And it's just one more piece of normalizing this. And again, thank you for being so strong and so open about that. I hope to have you as a permanent member of this tribe. Thank you so much again, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments or? No?
The images are so powerful, Rob. And I really do appreciate just the energy behind how passionate you are about really, really talking about this.
You know what? It really does come down to, I don't want any other first responder from any service or veteran. I don't want them to be where I was on June 2nd.
Absolutely. I don't either. I don't want people to suffer in silence and really have a place of safety. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I speak really quick? I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Go ahead, Brenda.
I just wanted to say, when I was listening to your story when you first started and you mentioned your friend and you said it was your friend that saved you. When I was going through my own life challenges, it was my friend. I thought of my friend and I remember the funeral and I remember the fallout and I remember how ugly and all the questions that everybody had. Like, why? She had the perfect life on the outside. She was married, she had her career, she had everything going, the beautiful house, the this, the that, and everybody thought it was wonderful. And me being one of the last persons to talk with her, I did the what could I have said different? What should I have said? I said XYZ, should I have said Z, ZYX, and when I had my own stuff, like I said, going on, it was that image of everything that happened as to why the minute I had an ideation, I knew, girl, you need to go get help, and I remember what was said at her funeral. The priest asked, is there anyone that is angry with her? Is there anyone that is upset with her or mad with her? And nobody said anything. Everybody just sat there quiet. And, me and my mouth, I'm a nurse. I'm not afraid. I'm going to ask the question or say what nobody wants to say. Okay. And I said, I said, I'm pissed off. I'm mad. I'm angry. And everybody turned around and looked at me like, uh-oh, we got one of those here. And I remember the priest walked up, because I was in the front row, and the priest walked up and he said, sweetheart, he said, I want you to know, and it still chokes me. He said, your friend was lost. He said, she was in a tunnel. Imagine a dark tunnel. He said, eventually you're going to get to the end of the tunnel and see the light. He said, please forgive your friend. She didn't see the light. And I always remember that. And I'll look all these years later, and that's one of the things that will trigger me, because I remember wholeheartedly, but everybody sat there so quietly and nobody said a damn thing. Nobody said a damn thing.
Yeah.
And I know that when I went in for help, as a nurse, I worked for a organization that preached and promoted to the general public prevention. And that's what I did. I worked prevention. My job was to keep you from getting sick, to make sure you had everything done so that you didn't have the long-term complications from health issues. And when I went in for help, I was told, whatever you do, don't tell anyone, because nobody's going to want to work with you anymore and your career is going to be over. And here I was in the middle of turmoil, trying to sort things out for myself. When I reached out as a professional, as a person, to go in for help, I was told, don't talk about it. And so those two things for me together are what drive me to help with the suicide cause. And I know down the line, eventually, you talked about toxic leadership and things that happen. Well, we all know people say things, this doesn't happen because you're union, this doesn't happen because of this. Well, everyone in management and all of us here know bullshit. Shit will happen even though it's union. Okay. It's just swept under the rug differently. And eventually the leadership that I worked with, that was my mentor, when he went through his personal stuff, he took his own life. And so that's another thing for me that I question. How was I able to manage and navigate through my own demons? And here's the person that mentored me. And it wasn't with suicide prevention stuff, but in my professional career. And when it came time for them to navigate, the person that I looked up to couldn't navigate their own demons.
You know what? I always ask myself the question that we're not supposed to do, like compare ourselves to others. I always ask, why am I where I am in my journey and other people are not, and they've been off longer? Like, what is it? You know what? Everybody is unique. Like, with PTSD, not everybody experiences the exact same symptoms. The symptom package for each person is unique to them. How people dissociate is unique to them. And, it's the same with suicidal thoughts and being able to pull yourself out of that spiral downwards. The one thing that I've learned a lot through therapy is how much of our challenges now originated in childhood. I know it sounds like the typical, oh yeah, what were you like as a kid? But it's so true. There was a study out a while ago called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study.
Yeah.
That shows that the greater number of adverse childhood experiences you have had increases your risk of things like chronic illnesses and things like PTSD. So, I mean, I could say really simply, maybe he had experienced more adverse childhood experiences than you had.
No, absolutely. I know part of his history, and I know that. And I think, the former pediatric nurse in me is going to tell you everything relates back to childhood trauma, and you had trauma whether you know it or not,
Yep,
and whether
absolutely.
you choose to acknowledge or not is a different story.
Yeah.
But the nurse in me wants to say, I never want anyone to take their life. That's what my career is. That was my passion, to help everyone get better, send them on their way and back to the world. But, now that I work with numbers and our goal is to stop people, and, I'm on this project, it's like, well, when he took his life, I was like, well, that kind of messes up my statistics. I mean, that's the cynical part. You want closure on things. That's not the type of closure that I needed. You didn't have to go that far and that drastic, but then again, that's the gallows humor that is going to get me through, because that's how I've learned to process stuff. But thank you for sharing that, because as a nurse, those are the things that I pick up on, that where it relates to and how you handle things that way. But thank you, we appreciate it. And I love your artwork.
Thank you. You know what, there's one thing that I hear all the time surrounding suicide that it really and truly pisses me off. You'll hear people say, well, you know what, when somebody, and this is towards somebody who's has thoughts of suicide, it's, well, you know what, if you take your life, you're just passing that trauma on to your family and your kids and your friends. And I thought, you know what, all that's doing is it's adding more burden to the person who's already overburdened. It's saying, well, guess what, although you're overburdened and you want to take your life, you're now responsible for how these other people feel.
Yeah.
And the person who's already experiencing suicidal thoughts or was, wants to end their life, they're already overburdened. And, society's saying, oh, we're going to add more to it by making you responsible for other people's feelings.
Yeah.
I hate that. Aaron, you have a question?
Actually, sir, I just want to kind of open up and ride your coattails on what you just said. I'm a medically retired police officer. Was involved in an altercation, was hit by a car on the highway. Had some brain damage, lots of brain rehab, just living hell. I have to admit to you, I was having 3 kids. Before my injury, I knew individuals that were going through whatever it was they were going through, and they had mentioned they were thinking about taking their own life. And I remember, I think that is the most selfish thing you could ever do. That's the easy way out. You know why I thought that? Because I was ignorant and I sympathized. I didn't understand because I didn't walk in those shoes. I sympathized with their family, not them, and I was wrong. After my accident, I will tell you, I knew I was in trouble.
Yep.
I knew I was in trouble when it hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew that it wasn't that I wanted to take the easy way out. It was realizing my every second in existence does nothing but hurt and destroy everyone and everything around me. And that's when I knew. Actually, the other thing I knew when I wear watches, I love watches. I refused to let myself ever wear a watch again because I knew I didn't deserve it. And I knew, okay, look, this shit is bad, but you are 100% correct. People, they have no idea what it's like because when you're there, you're not taking the easy way out and you truly think your existence does nothing but destroy everyone. So you feel you're doing them a favor. So you were absolutely right. And I felt
escaping the pain. Yeah, it's about escaping the pain. I remember I had a discussion with somebody and they used the falling man from 9/11 and to try to explain suicide. And the person who jumped to his death or her death, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, they didn't want to kill themselves, but it was the better option than burning alive. So it's not like they want to kill themselves. Most people want to take their life, don't want to take their life, but it's the way to escape the pain.
I agree.
Right. So
I agree with what you said. So thank you. I really, truly appreciate it.
thank you. Anyway,
Continue real quick and say thank you, Rob, for joining us. And your artwork is fantastic. It's magnificent. And your ability to translate your thoughts into something that's so visual that everybody else can relate to is not only cathartic for you, but so important for other people to relate to. We're a very visual society, and we're not very good at feeling each other's emotions. So when you can translate your emotions into something that other people can relate to, I think that's super special. I know so many people in this group that have turned to being authors or writers in some form or fashion, which in its own form is an art as well. And I think when we can get those emotions to live outside of our head and somewhere else where we can see them, not even just anybody else, but where we can see them, they still exist and they're still there and they're still part of who we are. They're just not the scrambled eggs that are stuck in our head, and we can reflect on them and let them live somewhere where they make sense and where we can still relate to them and reflect upon them without them impacting our daily thoughts and clogging up our, our neural pathways. So we can let the good thoughts go through. So thank you for what you do. It's incredibly special, and you should be super proud of yourself. And thank you for your story.
Thank you. Anybody else? Sorry, Will?
Oh, Will. Yeah.
Hey, Rob, I'm going to mirror everybody else's comments. What you've got there going there is amazing.
Thank you.
Everyone's got their experiences. Everyone has seen something similar. We're all people. We're all humans. We all react similarly, and sometimes we just need to hear it from somebody else or see that piece of artwork and explains that you're not alone. There's other people out there that are going through something similar, and that's very cathartic. And thank you so much.
The one thing I tell people all the time is, you know what? PTSD doesn't give a shit whether you're male, female, doesn't give a shit what uniform you wear, what vehicle you arrive at the scene on. It doesn't give a shit whether you're a full-time firefighter or a volunteer fighter. It doesn't care. I mean, I say, and I include nurses in this as well, absolutely, is that, you know what? You can't go through a career as a first responder doing the things that we do, seeing the things that we see, experiencing the things that we experience, and not be affected, right? Like you can't. I say to people, you can't walk through water and not get wet, and you can't walk through a sewer and not come out smelling like shit. You can't go through a career and not be affected by it. You can't. And there's no shame in that, right? There is absolutely no shame in that. I don't look at my PTSD as like a badge of honor, right? But you know what? It helps me when I realize, okay, I've got PTSD, but I've done some good things that, have caused it, right? So yeah, it doesn't matter whether you're military or law enforcement or corrections or nursing or dispatch. It doesn't matter. So, and that's why Todd's not here anymore, so I can say this now. That's why, I've always said, the brotherhood and sisterhood. For me, the brotherhood and sisterhood that exists between fellow PTSD sufferers is stronger than any brotherhood or sisterhood I actually had at the fire hall. Because you know what? You guys get it, right? I can look at Dave, and Dave's a law enforcement, but if he's got experiences like mine, we get it, right? Like that's just some of the things that I've sort of discovered throughout my journey, right? And you know what? 99% of my support network isn't made up of friends and coworkers. It's made up of other first responders who have similar experiences. So that's why I find things like this tribe is so important, right? It is so important.
I always think of it too as just, we can connect when there's people who are willing.
Yeah.
That are willing to be open underneath the surface, and that actually can widen the tribe anyway. I mean, I feel like I understand where you guys are coming from, even though I will never know what it's like to be a firefighter or a law enforcement or veteran or a dispatcher or nurse, but I understand the feelings that I'm hearing. And usually that's where people stop. You could have all the things in common up here, but if we're not willing to go underneath, then you can have nothing. Oh, go ahead.
The other thing that helps so much is when you're talking to somebody else who's regardless of what emergency service they're in, and they've gone through this, they're not judging you, right? That's what's so strong about peer groups with lived experience, right? I say it a lot as well, is that, you know what? One of the big things about PTSD, anxiety and depression and lived experience with it is that lived experience sometimes makes you more of an expert than the people highly educated with lots of letters after their names.
Absolutely.
You know what? I mean, I can, the example I give people is, I can go to my family doctor, lots of letters after a name, and say, describe for me what it's like to dissociate, because I'm not quite sure. And you know what? She'll give me a textbook answer. I can go to somebody else and say, hey, Daniel, when you dissociate, what's it like? And he can explain it, right? And it's like, that's what I mean by lived experience makes you an expert.
Well, and Sarah's the glue that holds us together, right, Dave? We couldn't do this without her. And when you talk about disassociation, until I started treatment, I did my NLP training, I had no idea that that's what I was doing.
Oh yeah. You know what? I had a pretty good idea, because for me, I describe it for me like, people with Windows computers, you used to get that blue screen of death and then your computer would reboot. For me, it's like that, right? Where during that time, the brain is sort of like rebooting. There's like no awareness of anything, no thoughts, and I eventually start coming out of it. Right? And luckily for me, it's fairly quick. And I know what it is that causes the dissociation. Like I know what triggers it for me, which is in my case, emotions. So when I start to allow myself to feel certain emotions, it's overwhelming for me, and the brain does its funky little nothingness. So, I mean, I'm fortunate that my therapist also had a little bit of experience with vicarious trauma, because she went down to New York on 9/11 to help with, the first responders down there, to help, do therapy on them right then and there. So she's got some experience, which is amazing. Like I said, a lot of people I've talked to, they go through multiple therapists to find the right fit. And I lucked out. I mean, the one I found, my first one, is the best one. So, but I also have an equine therapist and an occupational therapist. Anyway.
I love that you really get support. And probably one of the big things of why you are healing is because you're willing to put yourself out there. You're willing to, get the help you need and share your story. Because I know, that's usually therapeutic.
All those highly educated people with lots of letters after their name, they all say the same thing about trauma, that it changes you permanently. And when I read that multiple times, it finally sunk in. It's like, okay, well, if trauma changes you permanently, that means I can't go backwards. I hear it all the time from first responders. I just want to be normal again. I want to be like I was before, right? And it's like, well, if trauma changes you permanently, you can't go back. So you have two choices: stay where you are and continue to suffer, or do what you have to reinvent yourself, evolve, and move forward. And that's what I'm doing. And you know what? I'm a better person because of it. I actually like myself now. When I look back the way I was before, it's like, I wouldn't want to be like that before. So yeah, it's what you do with it, right? And the other thing is, like I said, I mean, I've taken sort of like extreme ownership of it, right? I've made it my mission to, whether I have or not, is to know as much about PTSD, anxiety, and depression as my therapist does. Right? I don't think I'm anywhere near that, but I always joke with people that with the amount of stuff I've read and I've learned, I'm almost a full-fledged psychologist, minus the multiple degrees on the wall and the multiple years of education, but pretty close. I've read books that would make you sort of shake your head. Like one of the books I read was the Therapist's Essential Guide to the Brain. It was a really good book. It talks about all the different parts of the brain and what it does, because I wanted to know, okay, what's going on inside, right? I mean, I've remained open-minded, right? I wanted to, I said to myself, I'm going to be open-minded enough to try everything there is out there. And I've done CBT, CPT, EMDR, EFT, radical acceptance there. Like I've done them all, right? And some work and some don't. And I keep the ones that work. Like I said, I tried coloring, didn't work for me. Tried journaling, didn't work for me. Tried equine therapy, that really worked for me, right? So it's well, being open-minded enough to try, right? And having blind faith in the process that it's going to work, even though I have no idea what that process is, right? That and I mean, the other thing that I've done is my philosophy is I'm not going to wait for my recovery to happen. I'm going to make it happen, right? And that's my approach. It's worked for me. I don't know if my approach would work for everybody, but it's working for me.
It sounds very proactive. That's for sure. I mean, just,
You have to.
yeah,
You know what?
good.
I can tell you, I learned early on, first responder, right? First responder, firefighter. I've got PTSD. What's the worst that can happen? Right? Well, guess what? I know what the worst is because I was almost there. Things like, PTSD and depression. I've crawled through burning buildings. I can surely handle whatever this PTSD and depression is. And then the PTSD and depression teaches you the truth, right? So anyway.
This was great. Rob, what a great conversation. What a,
I can keep talking all night, but I'm not going to.
yeah, I think, Daniel, good to see you.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to go ahead and shut off the recording. Thank you, Rob, so much. This has been really interesting. Really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.